Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started? And what are they doing to stay there? And here we are, the Thanksgiving season. We're in season 3, and I have another special guest. Today, I'm getting to talk to Josh Lipscomb. He is the Senior Vice President of Total Rewards at Varsity Brands. He's got certifications in HR and compensation and a whole lot more. And Josh, I'm so glad to have you on the show. How you doing?
Good, Bruce. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Man, I'm glad to have you. You know, I always like to reflect when I met my guests, and for you, I remember the specific day. We have a mutual friend, Tony Bridwell. He's been on the show, and he invited me to come up and visit with your group. And I met you and another wonderful lady. And I remember that day how impressed I was with you and your leadership. Do you remember that?
I do. I remember sitting in the conference room as you were talking about relocation. I remember.
We were talking about relocation, and I've been following you ever since. And recently, you there was an article that was published, and I was reading that, and I thought, you know what, it's time to get Josh on the show. So I'm glad to have you on. Hey, before we kind of kick off with your story, I would love for you to share just a brief highlight of Varsity Brands for those who don't know. Maybe a brief highlight and how you serve your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So Varsity Brands, we're largely business to business. So a lot of people don't know the name, but we are the combination of 3 different businesses, about 7,000 full-time employees, U.S. only, and we our purpose is to elevate the student experience, and we do that through sport, spirit, and achievement. And more about that is that we make and sell sporting goods, cheerleading apparel. We do cheerleading events. We have other academic things we do, like class rings, caps, and gowns. We make and sell those things to high schools around the country, and that's our business in a nutshell.
I didn't realize that. That's fantastic. I knew that BSN Sports, one of your groups, and I knew you were into sporting equipment. I didn't think about class rings, and there's just a whole lot there. And I love anytime someone mentions we want to elevate the experience. Anytime I hear that, I'm like, you know what? I think they are working for a very purposeful company.
Without a doubt, this is the most mission-driven company I've ever worked for, and it's a difference maker for me because I'm really mission-driven myself, and to work for a company that has a real clear view of what their purpose is as a company, it is, if someone's never worked for a mission-driven company, they don't know what it's like, but those who have understand exactly what I mean, because it gets you up in the morning, everyone's aligned, you have the same North Star. It's really helpful, and it's been a part of my leadership journey recently. I'll talk about it later, but working with this company has been really helpful to kind of solidify and cauterize my own mission.
I love that because I always talk about values driven leaders, mission driven leaders, and how they just seem to have joy, right? Joy in their everyday. It's not just their career, not just their personal life, not just in the community. They just have joy, and it's because they have that alignment. And so I'm definitely looking forward to hearing your story. Hey, well, I would love for you to share the Josh Lipscomb story. I mean, where did you grow up, and how in the world did you get into HR and leadership?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like it's a funny question because most people don't grow up as a child saying, I want to be an HR professional. I actually talked to my daughter's class about HR, and the whole class was kind of confused. Like, what? I don't really understand this job. I don't understand what you do or why you do. But my daughter did tell me she was really appreciative to learn more about what I do, and it helped her appreciate, why I go to work each day. But not really part of the story. But I can tell you to kind of start off. I'm a Texas boy, born and raised, and I grew up in College Station, Texas, which is a sort of small town south of Dallas, where I am now.
Yep.
Grew up, so the College Station is where Texas A&M is located. I grew up loving A&M, was very much into sports. I played football from an early age, and played at a pretty high level in high school. Was actually headed to college to play D1 football, and I had a really serious neck injury my senior year. Paralyzed on the field. It was pretty serious. And so all my plans to play football in my future life, they ended in that moment. And that injury really changed my life. It made me question everything because I'd put my entire identity into being a football player. And that whole thing crashed away. And that moment in my life was the beginning of my faith in Jesus. And it's really what started a whole new path for me in every possible way you can imagine. And my identity as a football player got replaced by my identity as a child of God. And that defines me today. It defines who I am as a leader, defines who I am as a father, as a husband. I look back and think what a hard day that was, but it was a really impactful moment in my life at age 18. And so, I went on to A&M. I didn't play football there, but I went on to go to school there. And had I been a student athlete, I wouldn't have gotten to do a lot of the extracurricular activities I ended up doing at A&M. And while there, school was important, but maybe not as important as some of the extracurricular things. And I might have done it a little different if I could go back, but I was really thankful for all the things I learned there at A&M. And in my extracurricular, I had a chance to lead an organization called Fish Camp, which was a freshman orientation program at Texas A&M. And me and some of my peers, we had 900 counselors that kind of answered to us. 5,000 freshmen went through the program. So I was getting leadership lessons at age 21 in a really big way. And I was pre-med. I was going to go be a pediatrician. I realized my junior year that was not my dream. It was everyone else's dream that I had just adopted as my own. And so I changed my major. I knew I didn't want to be a doctor and didn't want to go to all that school. Changed to be a communications major just to graduate. It took me 180 credit hours, and 5 years later, and too much of my parents' money. Thankfully, they paid for my college, but they paid for more college than they bargained for.
Yeah.
But I graduated with a communications degree and then didn't know what to do. And so I took a job in sales, kind of a long way to get to how I got to HR. But I moved to Los Angeles because I had lived in a small college town in Texas and thought, what's the most different experience possible? So I moved to Los Angeles, took a sales job, really did not enjoy that sales job. And then a friend of mine at a church out there said, hey, there's this temporary job in HR. If you're looking for something different, you ought to give it a try. I know the company. And I thought, well, I like people. I like helping people. But what little I know of HR, they help people. So why don't I give that a try? And the rest is history. I've been in HR ever since.
That's a fantastic story. A lot of adversity there, a lot of choice making. And I want to go back to your injury. You mentioned, and man, I just can't even imagine, as a parent, my child being injured on the field like that. But you said you knew that, like, that moment changed. Was there some people in your life that helped, like you've seen that, you're like, hey, I want to go this direction? What made that moment for you to, as you mentioned, put your faith in Jesus Christ and just moving towards that direction with your life? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So if I'm really honest, and it's actually one of the things I think is true of good leaders, is they're honest and transparent. And I'll share that in a little bit as well. But I was dating a girl who was a member of a church, and I wanted her to like me more. So I thought if I went to church with her, maybe she'd like me more. And there was a guy at the church that she brought me to that had taken an interest in me, and he knew I didn't have any interest in the things they were teaching at church. And he just started caring about me and getting to know me. And he came to my football game that fated night and was in the stands, had gotten down onto the field. And when I got injured and got brought off the field, he was there on his knees next to me and was talking to me about, it's okay, life's not over, life will let you down, but I know there's one thing I've been talking to you about, he'll never let you down. And in that moment on that field, the relationship we had built, he's a big catalyst to how my life changed.
That's fantastic. I have chills you telling that story. I feel like I'm like right there on the field right now, a part of that. And so for those listening right now, pull out your pens and your journals. There's going to be some great stuff here. I love your journey. And it's amazing how, we have this, like, this is our plan. We're going to go do these things. You're going to go play football, but yet, because of that turning point, you got to participate in all these extracurricular activities. You met the person in California, says, hey, you ought to be in HR. And then here you are today. And I always like to say that, it's hard to see ahead as young people. It's hard to see our careers ahead. But once we get to a certain point, we can look back and go, wow, I can see exactly how all of that happened, all the decisions, all the choices that I made to get to that point. I love that. You talked about this, your friend at the church. I always like to ask the question around mentorship. I mean, you didn't start out as a senior vice president, right? You started out, communications, trying to figure out what you're going to do, but here you are. I'm just curious, were there some other mentors as well that helped you along the way? And if there were, what was it about them that made him a great mentor?
Yeah, there were, and there's a few mentors if I think about throughout my life that really impacted who I am as a leader. The first would be my parents, honestly. My mom and dad, they owned a small business in College Station, actually in Bryan, which is the kind of sister city to College Station. And it was a small carpet store. And my memory of them is, and I actually talked about this in the article you may have read, but my memory of them is they came home every day covered in dirt and sweat because they believed that they would never ask their employees to do something that they wouldn't do themselves. And so that meant they were on the ground, cutting carpet, rolling carpet, interacting with customers, cleaning floors. And that lesson, the lesson I learned from them was that you should never be above the work that you expect of your employees. And my parents' employees respected them more than anything. And it's because they knew that they would never ask them to do something that they wouldn't do themselves. And they came home dirty all the way from the first day they opened that business to the day they sold it and retired. So they never outgrew that leadership lesson that they taught me. That's the first. The second one, if I can just go, if it makes sense for me, just kind of go through some of the mentors in my life. The second is my first boss in HR. Her name was Kesa. She was the head of HR at this small company where I was a temp employee, and she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and that was a love for numbers and data and trends. She just saw it in meetings. The questions I was asking, I didn't know what I was doing. I was a 23-year-old kid, and she encouraged me to think about a role in compensation or benefits. And she put her money where her mouth is. When she left that company and went to another one, she took me with her and hired me as a comp analyst. And so that's the second lesson I learned, is that sometimes the people on your team, they don't have enough belief in themselves and they can't see the good in them for whatever reason. And as a leader, it's our job to identify and encourage and point out those things. And her belief in me changed the progression of kind of the path that my career took. The third is another leader of mine who was a comp expert, and he taught me everything probably 90% of what I know today about compensation, I learned from him. His name was Todd, and just a lifelong compensation expert, a technician, and taught me how to build ranges and do all the technical aspects of compensation. I mean, the value of on-the-job training and taking the knowledge you have and giving it to those on your team is so valuable. And I do that today because of what he did for me. And then the fourth out of 5 leaders that I can think of is Tony. We both know him. He was my CHRO at 2 different companies, and he taught me about vulnerability and transparency and appreciation for those you work with, and the power of being honest and vulnerable, and talking about the term he uses, the skin knees that you get in life. And don't hide those, talk about them, because everyone has skin knees, and it's helpful to see a leader who's willing to share that. And then the last mentor is my current boss. Her name is Martha. She's our CHRO at Varsity Brands. What I've learned from her is the value of knowing and understanding the business that you are in. She knows more about the business than many of our non-HR business leaders, because she understands how important it is for HR to understand how we make money, how we lose money, what those levers are, so that we can help the business and be a true consultant and confidant. And between all those things, I've really gotten a great, well-rounded view of what it means to be a leader, not just in HR, but in general.
Man, I got to tell you, Josh, I love that. I feel like you are surrounded by the dream team. I'm sitting here thinking like a basketball team. You got these 5, you have your parents that taught you all these great lessons in CASA, and then the Todd who taught you about comp, and then of course Tony Bridwell. I mean, it's hard talking about skin knees. It's not easy to do, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. And then your current CEO talking about knowing the business. I love that. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I know there's some people listening right now who can identify with that, as well as me be thinking about, hey, maybe I need to tap more into that. I just love that. Hey, I always like to ask this question as well before we kind of get into our main topic. And it's always around purpose. I know you're a purpose-driven a leader, and I always like to ask, my first book I wrote is called Find Your Lane, and it was really about like finding your calling, like what really moves you. And you've obviously found your lane. I was just wondering, like, was there a moment like in your career where you said, man, this is what I love to do. I know that you talked a little bit about Kesa, who saw that belief in you, and I just love that. Share that time or moments when you found your lane.
So interestingly enough, I didn't know it at the time, but I found my lane in college through fish camp
Mm,
and watching the counselors who
mm,
were kind of accountable to me lead their freshmen and teach them about college and how to be an adult, and watching them be successful
mm,
as a director who didn't have interaction with the students directly, but through subordinate folks were impacting students. And that's when I realized that the power that you can have as a leader, that you don't
mm,
even have to necessarily do the work yourself day in and day out, but the people around you, and when they're successful. And that really became my purpose of helping people find their own purpose and find their own success. I get so much more enjoyment out of watching my team succeed than doing something on my own. I love working in groups and on teams as opposed to kind of working by myself on something, because I love the teams around me to succeed. And I think that comes from my time as a football player or leading organizations in college all the way through. And it's why I love being a leader versus an individual contributor, because the kind of the sum of the parts idea.
It's fantastic. Helping people find their purpose. I absolutely love that. Hey, let's talk leadership. Here we are, 2022. We're winding down the year and getting ready to move into 2023. I always like to ask this question. Leadership is defined in so many different ways. If someone says, "Hey, Josh, what is leadership to you?" What would you say to that?
I think the best leaders are marked by servant leadership, and that's a result of my own mentors.
Mhm,
The theme of my mentors is that they were pouring into me, or
mhm,
were giving me things that I didn't necessarily ask for, or didn't know what to ask from them, and they gave it to me anyway. And so, to me, servant leadership is the best kind of leadership. And for me, what that means is that you make sure your team has what they need to be successful. It means putting yourself after the needs of your team, and whether that means working long hours to help your team, or whether it means putting your own priorities second to what they need. That's a big hallmark for leadership to me. But also, I think leaders need to be good followers.
mm.
What I mean by that is the best leaders have enough humility to put people on their teams and around them that are experts, so that you can follow their lead and expertise, because no one person has all the answers. And I think, pride comes before the fall, and the best leaders are full of humility and knowing that they can't do it themselves and they need their teams to be successful. That's what's been true for me, and it's helped me be successful. And so, kind of divided by me, that's my lens on what leadership is.
Great leaders are great followers. I'm with you on that right there. That gives me chills as you talk about that. Hey, let's talk about this article. I saw an article, and this is really what kind of drove me to go ahead and reach out to you. Is that it was an interview by Profile Magazine, and it was about how your managers are like coaches. And I love that because the organization you work for, it's all in alignment, and the focus is on providing your leaders with the right tools to focus less on the administrative task and more focus on developing talent. And we know how important that is. Talk a little bit about that, and what you've done with your organization, and what drives you in that area.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. And I do agree. There's some really cool synergy between kind of coach and manager, and we really are a sports company. That's how
Mm,
kind of our ethos.
mm,
We operate like a team on a members of a sports team, and because that's kind of who we are at our core, is about sports. And I mentioned before, but the mission of Varsity Brands is to elevate the student experience. And as a company, we do that as well, through providing tools to make, or we do through the coaches, right? The coaches
mm,
that are, helping their students. And that's how we think about it, is that we give the tools to the coaches so that they can, instead of ordering jerseys or dealing with the back office stuff, they can be on the field, on the court with their players, helping them with life lessons, with how to shoot a basketball, like whatever it might be. And then within Varsity Brands, we've turned that mission inward.
Mm,
And so we say internally that our purpose is to elevate the employee experience.
mm,
So same model, right?
mm,
Coaches, managers, and we give our managers tools to reduce the back office administrative stuff so that they can, just like a football coach, they can help their employees develop, shoot the baskets well, do their job well, live, have a full life. We really think about a manager employee relationship as more than just the job. And
mm.
it leans into this idea of whole person well-being, and it's a journey we're just beginning, but it's really important to us. And by giving these managers the tools they need to really do their job more easily, it does allow them to focus more time to develop their employees. Just like my mentors developed me, whether it was compensation things or learning about vulnerability or learning about the business, these are all development tools that each manager in their best version of themselves is doing for their employees day in and day out.
I think that's fantastic. As you say this, I'm sitting here thinking, what you're doing is you're looking through the customer's lens, right? And you're saying, hey, if we, as a customer, as a coach, if we had these tools, we can elevate that student experience. And then you're talking about turning that inward, right? So you're developing talent both inside and outside the organization, which is what I really love about that.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought about it, but you're right. We are in an interesting way. We're developing talent inside the schools through the coaches and
Yeah.
inside our four walls through our managers.
Yeah, oh man, that is so good. You also stated that and you throughout the interview, I've kind of felt this, but you stated when you wake up, you get to live out your mission that overlaps the company mission and that's the sweet spot. Talk a little bit about that because there's probably some people out there that have that same feeling like they get up, they're ready to go to work, but they can't quite figure out like why that might be. Why is that for you?
I really do believe everything in life is sort of the result of the path we've been on, whether it's mentors you have, whether it's an injury on the football field, whether it's being involved in a student organization at Texas A&M. But you know the story about the gentleman who was on the field with me, Tim was his
Mm-hmm,
name, the youth
mm-hmm,
pastor.
mm-hmm,
His involvement in my life really was a game changer for me. There's an organization I'm involved with, which is what kind of ties to my personal mission and my company mission. There's an organization called Young Life,
mm-hmm,
and I'm on the board for locally. And Young Life's mission is about really through relationships,
mm-hmm.
go and be around the kids in these high schools and just build relationships to a point where you get the right to tell them about what a relationship with Jesus might look like. And so Young Life is elevating the student experience through the gospel,
Mm,
for their their eternity potentially. Varsity Brands is doing that in high schools, different vehicle, different
mm-hmm,
method, but
mm-hmm,
the goal is ultimately to improve the lives of these kids, whether it's through sports or through academic means or cheerleading. These coaches feel the same way. They believe they can change a life, just like Young Life believes that the gospel can change a life. And so most of my free time is spent, if it's not with my family, it's doing stuff with Young Life. And then at work, there's just this real synergy. And when I knew it is when I was interviewing for this role several years ago.
mm-hmm.
They were asking me why Varsity Brands, and I got to tell them about Young Life. Said, well, it's because my personal passion lines up so nicely with what we're doing at Varsity Brands. And you could see in the interviewer's face, like, oh wow, yeah, those are totally analogous to each other, and just different methods. And it was cool that it was the first time I had ever got talked about Young Life in my job interview, and I was like, you know what, maybe this is the place for me.
That's fantastic. I love that because all of a sudden now the job that you're interviewing for probably even feels different. Like it feels bigger than a job. Like I'm going for something bigger than a job now. I'm like going for something that's going to just be part of my life. And by the way, I'm going to get paid for it and I'm going to grow and I'm going to be surrounded by incredible people. That's fantastic. I love that. Oh my goodness. Hey, well, I think Adam Grant had also posted something around. I thought this was interesting around the topic being busy. I think Adam Grant had posted something around sacrificing health and family for work is not loyalty, but a sign of poor priorities. And it hit me. Because I've seen this, right? I've seen this in the workplace, and I wanted to ask you about that. How can we create these boundaries in the workplace to give us the margins to take care of ourselves, so we still feel like we're engaged and we're valued? And I think it's been really hard these last 3 years. I think it's probably getting a little bit easier as we move out of what we were just in. But I just remember there were times for me even go like, oh my goodness, I don't have my boundaries anymore. Everything's just kind of overlapping. Talk a little bit about the Adam Grant talking about sacrificing health and family for work not being loyalty.
Yeah, so I'm a big Adam Grant fan, first of all, and
Me too.
this
He's great.
idea, yeah, I mean, I love listening to anything he does or reading anything he writes, but for me, so I've got a family of girls at home. So my wife and 3 girls. I got an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old. So I am surrounded and outnumbered, and these girls are a huge priority for me.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want them to feel like they are not
Yeah.
more important than my work. And I'm intentional about that. And I ask the question, do you feel like my work is more important than you? And if they say yes, then I have to kind of stop and reevaluate. But so I really do fight to not let work take the time from my family. And I protect it in a few different ways, and I think leaders have to model good behavior. So I could tell my team, you need to take time and go do whatever is important to you, whether it's family or friends or whatever it is that gives you energy and rejuvenation. You need to make time for that. Don't let work overtake that. But if they see me taking calls into dinner time and throughout the night and on the weekends, if they see me doing that, my words are empty because they don't feel safe to do this, what I've asked them to do, because they're not watching me do it. And so as a leader, I have to model that. And so I do. I set boundaries. I don't take meetings after 5:30 because dinner is a really important time for my family. I do my best to not work or respond too much at night or on the weekends. I mean, in certain situations where you've got a project or whatever, that's different.
Right.
But as a
Right.
rule, I
Right.
try to really protect those windows because I want my team to see me doing it so that they feel safe to do it themselves. And I think that's the big miss, is that leaders talk about, oh, well, you got to have balance. You got to, whatever your word is, work-life balance or success or harmony, whatever word you want to use. We preach that, oh yeah, you need to have this. It's important for you as employees. But if we aren't doing it as leaders, then it doesn't really matter what we say.
This is a great topic. I could talk about this for hours, but I do want to ask this one question for those who are listening. Maybe it's some people that have struggled in this area. I wonder if you could share some tips. I mean, you mentioned that you try not to take calls. You try not to work unless projects come up, but there's probably some people listening right now that you know what? I want to pivot a little bit. I want to start working towards that. Any thoughts or tips around? And first of all, they may also have a culture where leadership doesn't have that same philosophy, right? So that could be challenging for them as well. But any tips for someone listening that says, you know what, I want to do better in the area of setting my boundaries, being a better person, being a better husband, wife, worker, whatever that is. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I do. It is a challenge, especially if the culture where you work doesn't facilitate that.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of practical tips on how to make, some progress towards, boundaries and balance, the first thing I would recommend is that as an employee, you just talk to your leader and just say, this is important to me, and I need to talk to you about it because I see that my priorities are out of whack, and my family and my family relationships or my friend relationships or my ex situation outside of work is suffering, and I need your help, leader, to prioritize better because it's important to me, and it's a problem that because I'm out of whack. And first you got to just open that dialogue up. But I think too, the only way to create boundaries is to reduce the amount of work you have to do. Because if there's too much work to do, it's really hard to set a boundary to say, well, I'm going to stop working because there's 400 emails that are unread. Like, it's really hard to like stop, right? You feel it's almost
Yeah.
more stressful to stop than to not stop,
Yeah.
right? And so I think we have to start having discussions with our leaders to say, I either need help to do this work, or we have to not do as much work. Like, it's
Mm.
pretty black and white. Like, you can't ask me to do all this work. It either has to be less work or I need help, because I can't continue to work 70-hour weeks or whatever the situation is, or I can't continue to work all day Saturday, whatever each person's situation is. And then if you build that construct, then you can have the conversation that says, all right, you want to add a project? We're either going to have to bring somebody on as a contractor or full time to help me with this new project, or we're going to have to take something else off the list. Like, I'm at capacity. And we don't do that in general. We just say yes. Yeah, we'll take care of that. Instead of saying, we don't have the capacity. I mean, I think about a professional services organization. If you have a client that says, hey, we need you to do this work, what happens? You do an SOW and you quote the work and you say it's going to take these 3 resources to get it done, and here's how long. You don't say we'll get it done and you do it with the same people.
Yeah.
We really need to think about our work in the same way, that like there are so many hours in a day, and we will burn our people out if we just continue to ask them to do more with the same or more with less.
I got to tell you, when you talked earlier about coaching, that's exactly what you're doing now. And that's some great, great coaching right there. I love that, because I know there's some people out there that even people I've talked to, their HR departments of one, right? And so they're like, hey, I don't have any help. But what you said was, you got to have that conversation. You got to start with a conversation and start working through the process. I love how you shared all that. And I know there's some people listening right now that are like, oh my gosh, you know what? It's time to have that conversation. And this has really been helpful. And at the end of the day, it's trying to come to, an agreement on how you can get that accomplished, right?
It is. And Bruce, the last thing I would say, I think we are in a moment. I think the window is closing a little, which I don't like, but I think we're in a moment where employees have more of an ability to say, uncle, because of the turnover rates are high and the quiet quitting, and employers are starting to feel nervous about, oh, my employees aren't happy, they're going to leave. Whereas in the past, it's just sort of like, they're not going anywhere, we'll just keep working them. And I think that the dynamic has changed in a good way towards the employees. And I think that employees need to take advantage of that, to speak up and speak their mind respectfully, obviously, to say, look, this is the current situation is not working. We got to figure something out.
That's fantastic. Great advice. I love that. And I know that's going to help a lot of people. And like I said, we could talk about this all day long. Hey, I want to ask you one more question. And I always like to ask this question. You've given some great advice today, but I always like to ask, was there ever any advice that you were given? Maybe it was by your parents early on. I mean, you've shared some great things about them, or maybe one of your mentors, or later in life. Was there some advice that was just so good, you just find yourself sharing that often?
Yeah, so I mean, I can. So, Kesa, who I talked about before,
Yeah.
she taught me something early on that is actually I think it's a little controversial for an HR person to say this, but I have told probably a dozen or more of my friends this in a certain situation. And the advice I got from Kesa was that, you spend too much time at work to not enjoy it. And um, not to say you should quit after your first bad day, but if you look back and it's been 60 days and 50 of those days are really hard and only 10 of them you left thinking that was a good day, you should really like rethink your situation, because again, work is not supposed to be easy, but it's not supposed to be miserable.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, what I tell my friends that ask this is that, look, a company ultimately is not loyal to you. And this is where I think the controversial part comes in as an HR person.
Sure.
As soon as someone's role is not needed, or you become expendable, you won't have a job. That's just the brass tacks of it.
Yeah.
And you can't forget that. And you can't let that, you got to let that drive your priorities. Your family and your friends are going to depend on you for a lot of stuff for your whole life. So you've got to prioritize them. And if your work is creating a challenge,
Yeah.
in those areas, like, that's got to be the priority.
Well, and you're going to do better work when you enjoy your job, the company, the people you're around, and all of that. I always talked about, you find your lane is about finding joy in every area of your life, including your work. And if you don't have that joy in your work, it's going to create challenges for you in other areas as well. And so I saw a meme one time, or a picture, and it had like, I don't know, it had like 1,000 little tiny green dots on it, but there were a few red dots, and what those red dots represented was bad days. And the point is that yes, you're going to have some challenging days. We all do, but the majority should be green.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the caveat I would say too is that idea of you got to be loyal to your family and work doesn't matter. That's not what I would want people to hear me say. And I also think, when you're working, your work should be excellent, and everything you do you should be striving to be excellent in everything, because it's the right thing to do, and it's what you owe your employer, and it's what's your employer deserves from you as an employee, is to do everything excellently. I'm just saying that if you're in an environment that's toxic, you don't stick in there because of loyalty. But you gotta find the right place for you, because it takes away your joy. To your point, you're not in your lane at that point.
Yeah, I love that. At the end of the day, that's what we're all striving for, is to add value to the organization. And we do that by, delivering excellence in all that we do. I love that. This has been outstanding. I know there's some people listening that are like, you know what, this is really like made me pause, made me think about some things, and helped me moving forward. And so I appreciate you sharing all of that. Hey, I want to shift over to the last part of the show. It's called It's Time to Accelerate. Ask you a few fun questions. First question I always like to ask, Josh, would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast?
Podcast all day. I'm not a big book guy. In fact, most of the books I've read have been on audiobook.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm a part of a book club, and I remember we chose a book one time, and one of the CHROs said, "You know what? If the book's not on Audible, I'm not going to be able to participate." I love that. Hey, we're here. It's Thanksgiving week. It's always a great time to be thankful, but especially during Thanksgiving season. I would love to ask you, like, what are you grateful for, Josh?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's something that as a family we try to do. We try to talk about things we're grateful for, because when you express appreciation in your life, it elevates your emotional well-being, and reminding yourself to be thankful for the things, even the small things, day by day. Some people keep a gratitude journal where they write down the things they're grateful for that day, and I think it's a great practice. But it's in terms of what I'm grateful for, kind of in order. I'm first and foremost my faith. I'm super grateful that God saved me, frankly. I was a pretty messed up little kid, and still am a messed up but grown adult, and he loves me anyway. So I would say I'm thankful for that first and foremost. My family and my friends come after that. But I'm grateful to work at a company. I mean, we're talking about being a leader at a company. I'm grateful to work for a company that has a great mission that I love working for, and the team that I have. So I have a lot to be thankful for. I have good health. I'm thankful. A lot of people can't say that, so I'm thankful for that too.
That's awesome. I'm thankful for you coming onto the show today and sharing for others. Outside of work, like, what energizes you? Like, what do you like to do?
So I talked about Young Life. I get a lot of energy from that. I am an Aggie, and I'm an avid football fan, though being an Aggie football fan this year brings more pain than joy, though it normally energizes me. But I'll tell you, this year has been really hard. And just being outdoors, I love to hunt and fish, and just being out in nature, I really love. It's a good place for me to relax and unwind.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Hey, this is my final question. Probably my favorite question I like to ask. Josh, 10 years older, is around the corner knocking at your door, and you're going to go answer that door. What's he going to tell you?
It's easier for me to think about what I would tell my 10-year-old younger self from today. It's hard to think about what a 10-year older person would say. But I'll do my best. So I think I would say that mistakes don't define you.
Oh,
You're going to make them. They don't define you. Pick yourself up, learn from them, keep moving, fail fast, have grace for yourself and for others, because we all make mistakes. I'm hard on myself, and as a result, I can be hard on my team, but I would say I should have more grace there and don't allow those mistakes to define me.
I love that. Don't let mistakes define you. I got to tell you, I have a love-hate relationship with failure myself. My whole career has been lived through failure, but I've grown from that. So I love it because I grow from it, and I've learned to share my stories when I skin my knees. That's been very helpful along the way. Hey, listen, I'm so grateful for you jumping on here today and sharing your story and helping with some coaching. I think it's going to serve a lot of people well. For those that heard something, Josh, that you're like, you know what, I want to learn more about that, or I want to follow Josh. How's the best way for someone to connect with you?
So, for work related stuff, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me under Josh Lipscomb. I think I'm the only one in Dallas at Varsity Brands. You can look for it that way. And if you want to follow me for non-work related stuff, mostly sports and other things like that, I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram at jlipscomb02.
Okay, fantastic. I
So
will put those links in the show notes so people can click on those real easy. And so again, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on the show, sharing your story and your perspective and your wisdom. And I can't wait to share this conversation. And I want to wish you and your family a happy Thanksgiving.
thank you, Bruce, and thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. It's fun to talk about these things. I'm obviously passionate about it, and I'm glad to be able to share this with you and hopefully anyone that listens.
Awesome. I can't wait to share. I'll talk to you later, man.
Thanks, Bruce.